Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the course of English for Academic Communication with me, Maria Dewi Rosari from Jakarta International University. Welcome to the last lecture. It's lecture 12, week 12. Well, we've come so far in this course, English for Academic Communication, and now we are in the very last meeting, the very last lecture. As I said in the previous lecture, Lecture 11 and 12 will be about academic talk. In lecture 11, we discussed about teaching demonstration, right? And as a part of one part of academic talk. Meanwhile, in this very last lecture, we are dealing with another academic talk, which are research talks and academic interview. And what's that? These two settings are, more are also challenging situations that that challenge our academic communication skill. All right. Before we start our lecture 12, let's find out what we are going to learn in this lecture 12. So the learning objectives that we are going to cover in this lecture 12 are as written on the right side of slide 2. In slide 2, there are 5 sections. 5 sections in here, and 2 of them have subsections. Okay, and I'll explain a bit about what each section will be about. The first one is unit introduction. Although some of the content of the unit introduction are the same with the one we had in lecture 11, but there will be some additional information to give you a clear picture of what we are going to have in this lecture 12. So I will introduce you the sections and what the section is going to be about and what is expected from you, what you need to do, and many others in section 1. And then in section 2, we have this section again. It's facing challenges and exploring hidden assumptions. So as usual, I will provide you with several diagnostic questions, and one of them will give you various situations that require you to reflect on your experience or your your insights on how to overcome such situations. Okay. And then in section number 3, it's about communication strategies and language for fielding challenging questions. Well, this section is similar to the one we had for the teaching demonstration, but the focus is different. The one we had in lecture 11 was about fielding challenging questions in a teaching setting, teaching demonstration of the real teaching session. But for this one, it will be about research talk and academic talk, academic interview. And there are 5 types of challenging questions that we are going to cover in section 3. They are a don't know question, a hostile question, a personal confidential question, and on a scale of 1 to 10 question, and the last one is no questions at all. All right, we will see the strategies on how to overcome or how to deal those challenging situations. And then in number 4, it will be about application activities, how all the strategies and the mechanics of language we have learned so far for research talk and academic interview can be applied in the real activities. And there will be 3 subsections for that. The first one is research talks. Number 2 is a mock academic interview. And the last one is we need to learn from those who have walked the path. And the last one, there will be another strategies for success. In lecture 11, it was about overcoming speech anxiety, right? But for lecture 12, because we have different settings, our context of academic communication, we are going to deal with preparing to answer questions in your academic job interviews. So if you have academic job interview coming up, try to prepare yourself, try to anticipate several questions, right? By looking at the strategies for success in section 1. Okay, so that's the bigger picture of what this lecture 12 will be about. Without further ado, let's start lecture 12 with the very first section, which is unit introduction. The final unit that covers lecture 11 and 12 introduces you to speaking situations at conferences, job talks, and interviews, and also teaching demonstrations for lecture 11. This unit builds on the abilities to express opinions and respond to questions in interpersonal, group, and teaching settings that you have developed in previous units. These abilities are highly applicable to presenting at conferences, delivering research talks, giving teaching demonstrations, and speaking during job interviews. But the abilities, skills, mechanics of language, expressions presented in this lecture is not, limited to only those communication setting. We can even use it in a different communication setting whenever possible. So the use of the material of this lecture is not limited. The recurring key components in this final unit, which include facing challenges and exploring hidden assumptions, application activities, and strategies for success, are designed with the main focus on developing your confidence and competence in communicating with mixed, diverse, or unknown audience members in fielding challenging or unanticipated questions. And then in the application activities section, I will provide you opportunities to put all that you have learned in previous units into practice with the aim of refining your ability to communicate your research according to the needs of your audience. So in the application activities, you will see the examples of situations in which you can apply all the mechanics of language and the strategies for success too. And then the strategies for success section includes questions and tips for academic interviews and pointers about controlling speech anxiety. The time is now to start preparing and practicing the delivery of the types of talks mentioned in this unit. Don't wait until your research is completed to present at conferences or until you have a firm call for an interview or a campus visit to start preparing what and how you intend to communicate in various scenarios and at various lengths. One-on-one meetings, group interviews, teaching demonstrations, and research talks. So, although currently you haven't had any invitations to give talk or join academic interview or giving teaching demonstration, it doesn't mean that you need to postpone the preparation. Start as soon as possible so that you have a lot of time, longer time to prepare yourself. So when the invitations arrives, you're already ready. You don't need to start from scratch, okay? Okay, so that's a description of what we are going to have in this last lecture, lecture 12. Next one, let's move on to section 2 about facing challenges and exploring hidden assumptions. All right, so as usual, this section will ask you several questions, even many questions. And those questions will ask you to reflect on your experience and how you think you can anticipate several situations, okay? And all those questions are diagnostic questions. So the name of the question is diagnostic. It means to help you diagnose your problems, diagnose your challenges, diagnose any hidden assumptions that you may have been aware of, right? So when you were aware of any hidden assumptions and challenges in this academic communication setting, you will be more prepared in anticipating them, okay? This is what you need to do. Explore these questions on your own if you use this material for self-study. In a classroom, share your thoughts about these questions with a speaking partner and be prepared to share your discussion with the class. And let's start from question number 1. Pause this video and stay on slide 5 if you haven't finished answering question number 1. Okay, take your time as long as you need, and whenever you're finished, you can go to the next slide. Question number 1. Share with your speaking partners or even just take notes on your answers. How you feel about your ability to answer questions during question and answer sessions at conferences or job talks. Well, the question is similar to the one that we had in lecture 11, but the settings are different. Okay, in lecture 11, it's about answering questions during question and answer sessions at teaching demonstration, But right now it's about in conferences or job talks. So different communication setting, different audience, different contexts, and different needs. What challenges have you encountered or would you anticipate encountering? What cross-cultural factors might come into play in this context? So again, we are dealing with cross-cultural factors, cultural influences. Together, brainstorm strategies that you can use when fielding questions. So please list down your challenges, including the cultural challenges if possible, and what do you think can be the strategies to overcome those challenges? So before I reveal the strategies to overcome such issues or such challenging questions, let's predict first or ask yourself what you need to do in that kind of situation. And then question number 2, it's very long. Let me read it for you. Fielding challenging questions. Building on the previous lectures where you explored how you would handle 7 types of questions that you might encounter during the questions and answer sessions that occur in departmental presentations. Explore with your speaking partners or with yourself, that's okay too. Please explore some strategies that you can use to handle the following 5 challenging situations in the question and answer sessions that occur in conferences and job talks. Be sure to consider both the strategies that cover how would you deal with the situation and also the language, what would you say exactly, and that you can employ when handling each of the following situations. Work in pairs and write down what you would say for each situation. The question is similar to the one we had in lecture 11, okay? But it's now for different settings. Academic interview, job talks. Situation 8, so it's related to situation 8 that we once discussed. A don't know question. So in a Q&A session, in a question and answer session, one of the audience members asks you a don't know question, a question whose answer you don't know. What would you do and what would you say in this kind of situation? Next situation, a hostile question. Again, hostile questions can occur in many academic communication settings, not only in a teaching, but also in a conference, in a job talk, even in an academic interview. So if you happen to be asked a hostile question, what would you do and what would you say? Next situation is a personal or confidential question. Well, sometimes some of audience members cross the line. They don't know the boundaries between a personal and non-personal question or confidential and not confidential question. Well, we cannot control other people. We cannot, control what other people may ask to us, right? But what we need to do and what we need to know is how to handle such questions. So if you happen to meet a personal confidential question about you, of course, what would you say and what would you do? If you haven't had any experience related to these situations, just imagine that you are having one. Okay, you're having one, and what do you think you will do or you can do in such situation? Pause this video and stay on slide 7 if you need more time to answer those questions. But whenever you're finished or whenever you're ready, let's continue to slide number 8. Next situation is situation 11. And on a scale of 1 to 10 questions. So some audience really like to ask such question, like we need to provide the range. We need to provide, we need to like score, provide a score like that. So if someone asks you that kind of question, what would you do and what would you say? Or would you answer it like by giving the exact scale, or would you skip it, or do you have another strategies to overcome such situation? And then last one is situation number 12, no question. You, for example, finish presenting your presentations, or you finish giving your talk, and then you open a Q&A session. And when you open the session, no one asks you a question. And then some speaker may get confused because no one is responding to the Q&A session. So if you happen to experience such situation, what would you do and what would you say? Will you give some prompts, or will you just skip the Q&A session, or will you wait? If you do wait, for how long, for how many minutes, or do you have another strategy that you can use? Okay, other question. What are some other challenges identified in question 2? Together, brainstorm what would you do and say to help you overcome them. So another challenges may come from the cultural factors, right? Especially if you are in a academic setting whose participants are from various countries with various cultures, right? As we discussed in lecture 1 in the beginning of this course, cultural factors may come into play, may bring a lot of influences to the communication we have, right? And that can create a lot of challenges to us too, especially if our speaking partner has a different culture, like low culture and high culture, for example. Okay, so I hope that you have some notes on what would you say and what would you do. If you haven't completed all the questions, please do not go to the next slide, because the next slide will be about the strategies to overcome that kind of situations. So what I hope is that you reflect on your own preferences, on your own experiences, and then I want you later to compare your answers to the ones that I will provide in the strategy section. Okay, so please take your time. Do not go to slide 9 yet. Okay, but when you're finished answering each of the questions there, let's move on to slide 9. It will be about the third section, about communication strategies and language for fielding challenging questions. Okay, we will discuss each of the situation or each of the question type there one by one. Okay, let's go. Communication strategies and language for fielding challenging questions, and it's for a don't know question. What do we need to do? Let's see. Facing questions that you don't have answers for can be challenging to anyone, including those who already have a lot of experience in speaking in academic setting. So don't worry. Whether you are speaking English as an additional language, or whether you are a graduate student or an instructor. For speakers from large power distance cultures, admitting that one does not know the answer can be even more difficult, because such an act counters one's belief about how teachers or presenters who are supposed to be the subject matter experts should behave. So again, cultural factor influences how we handle a don't know question. The inability to deal with questions that you should have been able to answer and that were raised during departmental meetings, thesis defenses, conference talks, and so on is a problem that you should strive to avoid through preparation. When questions arise that you simply cannot answer or that require more research to address adequately, learn to say so. And that's actually completely okay to say that we need more time to provide the responses. Instead of rushing into the answers, but we provide not a well-structured response and provide inaccurate response. Try the following phrases which will enable you to deal with such don't know questions in a professional manner. So there are several tips that can help us to deal with this situation professionally. Please repeat after me. I don't know the answer to your question, but I will find out and get back to you. Yes. Next one, use what I call the AAA strategy. It stands for acknowledge, admit, and assume responsibility. For example, that's a good question. I don't have an answer for you off the top of my head. Let me find out and get back to you. Yes, so when you say that's a great question, you acknowledge the question or the questioner, and then you will admit when you say, I don't have an answer for you off the top of my head. So we admit that we don't know the responses yet, and that's okay. And the last one is assume responsibility by saying, let me find out and get back to you. So we professionally and politely asking for more time to think of the answer. In some situations, redirecting is a great strategy. For example, if you are teaching or are speaking to a group of people whose individual areas of expertise you are familiar with, or if there is someone in the audience whose expertise is known to you, you may try saying this phrase. Repeat after me. You know, I'm not really familiar with blah, 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 but let me turn it over to the group. Does anyone have an answer to this question? So this is applicable when you and the audience share the same areas of expertise. For example, you were into phonetics and phonology, and someone in the audience asks you a certain question about it, but you don't have the questions off the top of your head. Then you redirect the question to the audience. Some people in the audience may have the answer or may have the experience that can provide the answers, that can address the answers, right? So that's okay. Redirecting it can be a good strategy in this kind of situation. Another phrase that we can use, please repeat after me. You know, this is not my area of expertise, and I know that Dr. Weaver has done some work in that area. Dr. Weaver, would you like to comment on Dr. Habersman's question? Yes, so what we can do in redirecting the question to the audience back is when we know that someone in the audience has works in the area of expertise, so we over the question to them, but still politely, not like giving instruction or comment, right? And that can be a good way to overcome this kind of situation. Next situation, a hostile question. You may have come across or witnessed or will probably encounter this kind of situation at a conference. Don't get discouraged if it happens to you. Learn the following strategies to address such a situation professionally and move on. So if this situation does happen, stay calm, don't get discouraged, don't get offended, don't take it personally, but please do the following strategies. Number one, remain calm and address the question directly and factually. Some have found that including the questioner's name in public situations has the effect of toning the person down, because all of a sudden his or her name is known to all and the questioner has a reputation at stake. Handling a question when you know the answer. Handle the question if you know the answer. You can do that by saying this phrase, for example. Thanks for raising that question, and I appreciate your viewpoint. I believe that blah, 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 provide the answer. If you'd like to discuss this further, I will be glad to meet with you after the session and discuss it in more detail. Good. Yes, so we handle it professionally, although we may feel offended, but we still need to handle it politely and professionally and be open still to the questioner. So we try to provide the question, the answer of the question, and we may invite the questioner to have a further discussion with us after the session. Next one. When you don't know the answer, you can handle the question this way. You've raised interesting points. I'd like to take the time to, yes. So it's okay if you think you don't know the answer to the question. You can say that. You can ask for the time to provide the responses. Postpone answering or redirect the questions by following the strategies described in the don't know question situation. So we can go back to the strategies from the previous challenging situation, which is don't know question situation, to overcome that kind of question. All right. Next one, a personal or confidential question. Well, this can be a test of your discretion and professionalism. So we need to really be, careful about when we are asked this kind of question. It is best to reply that you would prefer not to divulge any confidential information. So we need to make sure that we know the boundaries, which ones are confidential information and which ones are not, which are too personal and which ones are not personal. Then we can share it to our audience, right? Because it is a test of our discretion. It is a test of our professionalism in such academic communication setting. Here are ways to handle questions that may be personal or confidential in nature and may not be relevant to your presentation. So it's not only a question that is personal or confidential, but it's also not relevant to our presentation material. This is what we can say. Please repeat after me. That's a personal matter. Let's focus on issues related to the project. Good. I am not at liberty to disclose that information due to the ethics concerns. Good. I am not in a position to share that information because we are obligated to safeguard participants' anonymity. All right, so in here, those phrases show that we are firm about our decision not to reveal confidential or personal information, and that's okay. And as an academician, I believe that we and our audience also share the same understanding that we are not allowed to, to disclose any confidential or personal information, especially if it is about the personal information of our research participants, right? We already, agree with them that we won't disclose their personal information. So we need to stick with that. And it is a test of our professionalism. Our research participants may not be in the same room with us, but when we disclose their personal information, they may know it one day. Next situation, when we have on a scale of 1 to 10 question, what to do. For example, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your, or if you have to grade your X, what grade would it be? So in those kind of questions is on a scale of 1 to 10 questions example. How to overcome this? Your 6 on a 10-point scale could mean something very different from another person's 6. So our scale can be different or can be very different from other people's or other audience members' scale. So we need to be very careful in giving number because it can lead to debates or different arguments during the Q&A. Such numbers are highly subjective and relative. That's what I mean by we may have different scale, different number assigned to a certain issue. Instead of providing the questioner a number or a grade, provide concrete examples when answering this type of question. So it's not recommended to give an exact number or grade. On a matter that you feel quite confident about, please say this phrase and repeat after me. Just giving you a number on X would be an oversimplification. I'd have to say instead that I have done blah, blah, blah to enhance the trustworthiness of my research. Yes, so this phrase shows that when we go directly to giving a certain number or grade, we oversimplify our talk or oversimplify our material or even our research result. So it's not recommended to give a certain number or grade. On a matter that you feel less satisfactory about, you can say this one. Repeat after me. I agree that there is always room for improvement. However, I won't oversimplify the matter by just giving you a number. Instead, let me tell you what I have done or the step I have taken to enhance. First, right, these two examples of usable phrases to handle such questions are telling us that giving a certain number in the scale 1 to 10 is oversimplifications of the things we just talked about. So it's not recommended to do that, right? Next one, fifth type of questions is no questions. We all remember those awkward moments when you could hear a pin drop after the presenter invites questions and comments from the audience. Because everyone is silent, no one is talking, even the presenter is not talking because he or she is giving the audience time to say something, to give response or to give questions. Right? This silence could mean that you have done such a thorough job that there are simply no questions left, that your audience is completely lost or has turned out, or that cultural factors may be at play in your audience's response or lack thereof. So there are a lot of possibilities why no question situation happen. It can be because we have done such an amazing job in giving the talk so that everything is clear and no one is in doubt. But it can also be a signal that our audience is lost or doesn't get what we just talked about. That's the bad thing that we don't want to happen, right? But it can also be about cultural factors that influences that situation. It's because some people are not that fine or okay with asking question or being outspoken in a big forum like that. Carefully consider who your audience members are and their needs. So we can analyze our audience, especially if we are in a academic talk whose participants are from many countries or different continents. Some are from Western culture, some are from Eastern culture. So they may, may be influenced by the cultural factors in taking a part in a Q&A session. So consider our audience and understand their needs. In addition to making sure that you have done your work thoroughly in getting ready for the talk, always prepare a few questions in advance. Sometimes your audience members just need some time to warm up during the question and answer session. So maybe they stay silent or they haven't had anything to say because they still need time to warm up, need time to construct their questions, right? Before they really ask you the question. So during the silent moment, we can do something else, or we can do a quick quiz to review, for example, and that will be a good trigger for our audience to prepare or construct their questions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, so that's about communication strategies and language for fielding challenging questions for academic talk 2, academic interview, right? One of the examples. And the next one, we are entering section number 4, which is about application activities. Okay, there are 3 subsections for that. Don't worry if you use this material as a self-study, because I also provide you with how to do the activity in your self-study. Well, actually, it will be way better for you if you can invite one of your friends to do the activity with you, right? You can ask one of your friends to listen to you or to provide feedback to you. All right, let's find out the application activities in which we can apply all the materials and strategies and the mechanics of language we have covered so far. And the first one is about research talks. When you are conversing formally or informally with professional or personal contacts at conferences or in the interview process, you will have various critical opportunities, some very brief and some lengthier, to describe your research to various kinds of audiences. Fellow researchers in your field, researchers not directly in your field or outside of your field, potential future colleagues, students, and so on. It is crucial to be able to zoom in and out in your communication of complex ideas in a way that makes them accessible and interesting to the intended audience. This activity focuses on enhancing the clarity of language and context that is essential in conversing with people who have a wide range of areas of expertise. So when we are in a conference, say a linguistic conference, well, we know that the conference is about linguistics, but there are so many areas of expertise under the umbrella of linguistics, right? Some are into pragmatics, some are into phonetics, phonology, some are into semantics like that. So even though all those audiences are into linguistics, but that doesn't mean that they all have the same areas of expertise. And there is a possibility that we may present our material in front of the audience whose area of expertise is different from ours, right? Let's see the application activities. The instruction will be like this. Present talks describing aspects of your research in 4 different ways. So there are 4 different ways, yeah. I tried to find the synonym, but I can't. 4 different ways to describe aspect of your research. So from the very beginning, from the introduction until the conclusion of your research. Let's find out those 4 different ways. Number 1, the first way is prepare to give a 10-minute talk aimed at a non-specialized audience. So non-specialized audience, very mixed. Okay. This is applicable to research talks or job talks that ask you to make your research accessible and interesting to faculty and students alike. Carefully consider the need to provide more context for the information and do not assume any background knowledge. Remember your audience in non-specialized audience. Some of them may be from the same areas of expertise like yours, but some others maybe come from different areas of expertise. So we should not assume any background knowledge. And we need to carefully choose the right diction and explanation so that it's understandable for all the audience, regardless of the area of expertise. Okay. And then number 2, prepare. This is different way. Okay. Now it's just 5 minutes. Prepare to give a 5-minute talk aimed at an audience with mixed levels of background knowledge. Although they come from the same level of, areas of expertise, they come from different background knowledge. Some are very senior, some are very junior or newbie in the area of expertise. This is the scenario typically encountered when you speak at conferences and in all situations where time is a constraint. Consider what definitions need to be provided, what background information must be clarified, and what details should be eliminated. What details should be eliminated is important because different members in the audience have different background knowledge about the topic that you are going to present. Okay. The third talk is now 3 minutes, but with different type of audience. Prepare to give a 3-minute talk aimed at a specialized audience. Now specialized, different, yeah. Be very precise and succinct in your description without neglecting any essential definition of the background information needed for your listeners. to understand the nature and significance of your research. So now it's a specialized audience, for example, audience whose areas of expertise is phonology, for example. So we can be more concise in giving the explanations. That's why it's just 3 minutes compared to the previous ways of talk. And the last one, you will also need to try the situation. Prepare to give a 1-minute talk. No, just 1 minute, aimed at generalists. This is highly applicable to various formal and informal speaking settings. Focus on modifying your language and contextual information to make your talk accessible and concise, and to provide an account for the practical significance of your work. Ask yourself, what do you want your listeners to think about when they leave? Okay, so from 1 to 4, they are not procedures. They are not step 1 until step 4, but they are 4 different ways in giving talks about aspects of your research with different types of audience. It means that when we know our audience, we know how to, we know how to address our presentation, right? How we know what kind of approach is more suitable for this kind of audience and that kind of audience. Let's see again. In number 1 is a 10-minute for non-specialized audience. In number 2 is 5 minutes with mixed levels of background knowledge of audience. In number 3, it's just 3 minutes talk, right? It's shorter, but for specialized audience. And number 4 is just 1 minute, but for generalists. And we cannot mix them up. For example, 1 minute talk for the non-specialized or the other way around. We cannot do that. We need to treat different types of audience in a different way, and we approach our materials different way too. For this application activity for classroom instruction, this is what you need to do. Instead of having students deliver all 4 talks at once, you may focus on 1 type per session or per week, and also not to exhaust them, not to make them exhausted, to prepare 4 types of talks. We can, do this talk, for example, the 10-minute for week 1 and then 5 minutes for week 2 and so forth and so forth. So that we give enough time for the students to prepare and to feel the difference on how to approach different audience with different methods. Ask students to take notes of each presenter's talk, and while doing so, to keep in mind such aspects as structure, content, clarity of context, clarity of language, nonverbal language, and focal qualities. For example, pace, volume, pitch, inflection, and pausing. So when students are listening to other classmates, make sure that they take notes so they won't forget. Set aside some time at the end of each session to allow participants to share their feedbacks and thoughts. And don't forget this step too. Some students may have some thoughts to share about what they have just experienced with their classmates. So that's for classroom instruction. Okay, and now let's see if you use it for self-study. It's still possible too for you to use this application activity for your self-study, so don't worry. Find people who are representative of 3 kinds of audiences and who are willing to offer feedback to you. If you cannot do that, try videotaping yourself practicing delivering 3 talks and critically evaluate areas for further improvement. So don't worry if you cannot find someone to be your audience or to provide feedback to you. You can try videotaping yourself and then you try to evaluate yourself, or you videotape yourself and then send it to someone who is available to watch your talk and to provide feedback. That's also doable too. Seek out feedback from others. Most universities have professional development or career centers that offer support for skill development. Yeah, you can make most of this. Some universities have a certain division or certain division or department that can offer further career support for their students, and you can ask one of the staff there to provide you with feedback, to provide you with some comments on what you have done great and what you need to improve in the next practice or talk. So that's about research talks. You can do this activity for both classroom instruction and for self-study. For the next one, let's find out the application activities for mock academic interviews. The instructions will be like this. Number one, work in pairs to prepare and present a mock job interview. So this is applicable for take-home task, and also for self-study. Instruction number two, each student will take a turn being the interviewer and interviewee. Each interviewee will inform the interviewer about his or her target institution. Use the questions in section 5 in the next section to prepare both the questions and answers. So if you find it hard to construct the questions, you can just use the list of the questions that I already provided for you in section 5. The interviewer will select the appropriate questions to pose to the interviewee on the basis of his or her research about the target institution. The interviewee will anticipate the questions that the interviewer will raise. Number 4, the interviewee should write out and practice his or her responses for each anticipated question. When both are ready to present the mock interview orally, tape or video record each interview session. The interviewer should take notes to A, emulate what interviewers often do, and B, facilitate post-mock interview sharing and reflection. So after you have done or performed the interview, try to see the video recording or tape recording and try to reflect on what you have done so far. So you know what you have done great and what you need to improve in the next practice. And number 6, play back each of the 2 clips and reflect on each other's responses to various chosen questions in order to spot areas for improvement. So you can practice as interviewer and interviewee. And again, to help you, prepare the questions, you can revert to section 5. There are a lot of questions that you can use as interviewer, right? And for interviewee, you try to provide the best responses for those questions, right? So that's the application activities for mock academic interviews. And the next one is 4.3 about still application activities, but learn from those who have walked the path. So the best way to gain more confidence and gain more insights on how to apply all the theories, all the knowledge, mechanics of language and strategies that we have learned so far is to learn from those who have walked the path, of those who are more experienced than us, right? I have 2 questions for you. Even though you not yet have the experience of experiencing such academic communication setting, don't worry. This is the time for you to learn from the ones who are more expert than you. I have 2 questions, and I want you to answer that question. Take your time, meet the person that you think is more expert than you, and in nailing such communication setting, right? And learn from them. And the question number 1 is, if you haven't had any experience presenting at conferences, informally interview 3 people that you know have had such an experience and ask them to share with you some do's and don'ts in their preparation and delivery of a conference talk. What have you learned from them? So it's always good to have a sharing moment with someone who is more experienced than us, right? So that we can learn 1 thing or 2 or even a lot of things from them. And we can use their tips or this experience as a way to prepare ourselves when later we encounter similar academic communication setting. That's question number 1. Question number 2. If you are near the stage of an academic job search, informally interview 3 people whom you know have had experience giving job talks and ask them to share with you their experiences in delivering a research talk, giving a teaching demo, going through an interview with the search committee, meeting with faculty and students in the department, attending lunch or dinner functions, and so on. What have you learned from your conversations with them? So again, meet someone else who is more experienced than you, who has more experience, who has more knowledge, right? And ask them that question, interview them, ask them several questions regarding how they apply the strategies in overcoming challenging situations, for example. Maybe they have applied that as well, and ask them how it turns out, right? Maybe the strategies are very successful, maybe the strategies didn't work at all. And yeah, you just gain insight from them, and we learn from those who have walked the path, right? Well, ladies and gentlemen, so this is the end of the section 4 about application activities. Okay, and the next one, we are going to enter section 5, the very last section is about strategies for success, about preparing to answer questions in your academic job interview. So if you are having academic job interview coming up, so you need to really prepare yourself, and you can simply prepare yourself by taking a look at the list of questions and strategies in section 5 that I already provided for you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now in the last section of lecture 12, which is about strategies for success. And for the strategies for success, we are going to focus on preparing to answer questions in an academic job interview. So if you're wondering what kind of questions do interviewers usually ask in academic job interview, then you will find out the examples of the common questions here. And also you will also see some strategies to succeed your job interview. So even though the job interview coming up that you're going to have is going to be your very first job interview, you don't need to be too panicked so much, because I've got you covered. I've got some strategies and also examples of the questions. Okay, let's find out the strategies. Here are some common possible question types and tips that have been accumulated from both sides of the table. As a candidate searching for an academic position, and as a member of a search committee selecting a potential colleague. So these questions are not only listed from those as interviewers, but also those who are from candidate sides. Okay, so it will be rich. Take time to go over them and prepare how you would respond to interview questions relevant to the positions you are seeking. So do not be in rush in reviewing all the questions. Try to answer the questions that I will provide to you one by one, and try to figure out the best way to approach that question. I will provide you with well, many question types. It can be, I mean, the topics of the questions will be various, and in each type of the topic or each type of the questions, you will see the examples of the questions. The first one, the questions in academic job interview can be about thesis. The examples of the questions are, tell us about your thesis. How did you become interested in the topic? Usually, not usually, the topics that we use for our thesis is usually our interest or our curiosity. So we need to, know how to explain our curiosity and our interest that results in that topic choice in our thesis, right? And here are the few pointers on how to answer that kind of question. The first one, you need to prepare your oral summary ahead of time. Have a short version, 1 until 2 minutes, and a longer version, 5 minutes or so, in case more detail is requested. So if you just graduated, especially if you just graduated and then you apply for an academic position, there will be a high possibility that your interviewer will ask you about your thesis. And you need to provide a summary before the interview so that you have it ready in your head. And there are two types of versions of the summary that you need to prepare. The first one is the short version, 1 or 2 minutes, and the longer one, around 5 minutes talk, will also be important. Just in case that your interviewer give you longer time to, to tell about your thesis, and you have your explanation ready, so you don't, make the summary on the spot. Also have ready brief oral elaboration on, for example, methodology, major findings, theoretical background, empirical, theoretical, methodological, and practical implications, and the importance of your findings. Be precise, concise, interesting, and free of jargon. So in addition to having summary as a overall summary of your thesis, what is also needed is further elaboration of each aspect of your thesis. The methodology, for example, the methodology and also the implications. You need to be able to explain that orally as if it was done spontaneously, although you actually already prepared that before the interview, right? And make sure you make it precise and concise, and make it interesting, make it sound impactful, and also free of jargon. Don't assume they've all read your writing samples. Display enthusiasm and confidence about your dissertation. Because you're applying for an academic position, and you are in an academic job interview, so you need to make sure that you sound academic too. So when you're explaining your thesis, your dissertation, you need to be sure, enthusiastic, and confident about your research. And when you're asked to elaborate further about the research methodology and the major findings of your research, you need to be able to explain it well. Otherwise, your interviewer may doubt your academic ability, especially in conducting research. And as a university professor, it is very important to, to show our research ability, right? Remember that you know more than anyone else in the room about the topic. So we don't need to be nervous in retelling our thesis content or dissertation content, because the one that know best about it is us. Focus on the significance, contributions, and originality of your dissertation. So please highlight those things. Highlighting significance means we are showing that our research is important, having impact, or essential for people around us. So it is not just research or just a writing, but it has benefits like that. And also contribution, the same thing. And the last one is originality. Show that our research has novelty, contributes something new to the society or to the horizon of the research topic. Be prepared to talk about how your dissertation relates to the work of others in the field, to your future work, and to the wider academic world or professional community in general. So it's all related to the significance and contributions of our research, right? So in here, what should be highlighted is it is not only about we doing the research, but how the research that we did could contribute something to the field of our work, to the people around us, and to the academic community out there. Next one is publications. The topic about publications can also appear in your academic job interview. The examples of the questions are like this. How do you plan to revise your thesis for publication? So how will you proceed further with your thesis? Usually thesis is not yet published outside, right, in a journal, academic journal like that. So the interviewer may be wondering your plan to make sure that your thesis is, suitable to be published in an academic journal. What are some of your publications? And here, the question is more like your track record in publishing your research paper. So it's better if when you are still taking your study, it's actually better if you already know that you want to take an academic position after the graduation, you try to build a good track record. You, by, for example, publishing a research paper that you can show off later in your job interview. The next one, tell us about the papers that you are currently preparing for submission. Well, if you do have papers that you are currently writing, currently constructing for publication, so get ready to retell about it in brief. But if you don't have any papers you're currently writing, so just let them know the truth, because they will ask you about that in details. Next one, the question can also be about research. Can you describe your research and what you are currently working on? What do you consider to be your most important research contributions? So in here, it's about our research field, right? The research that we are currently doing, and from all the research that we have conducted, which one is the most contributive or the most important? So maybe before the academic job interview, we may need to review the research or the papers we have done so far. The next one, what is your research plan for this year or for next 2 years or in the next 5 years? What are your plans for future research? Remember that this is an assessment of the extent of your career planning and of your prospects for tenure. Be concrete in stating your short and long-term goals. Well, actually, in any kind of job interview, it is very common for interviewers to ask interviewee about their short and long-term goals. And in the case of academic job interview like this, the question about short and long-term goals will be about your research plan. Let's say next year or next 2 years or even in the next 5 years. When we are able to explain that plan for both short and long-term goals, so our interviewers, our HR of the institution we're applying to, they will see that we are taking this career seriously because we already have a plan for that. Still about research. How do you see your research fitting into departments such as ours, where we have a number of areas of specialization? So in this kind of question, be sure that you do your homework and know the areas of specialization in the department to which you apply. Whether is that Department of English Letters or Department of English Educations or what. So try to tailor the result of your research to the department you are applying to. So the interviewer will know that you will be a team member that is essential to the team. What have your greatest challenges been in your researches, and how have you responded to those challenges? For questions that invite you to reveal challenges and weaknesses, turn the questions into positive responses. Well, this kind of question is also actually a very common to be raised in a job interview. But since this is an academic job interview, so the question about the challenges that you have had so far will be related to our research, right? But in other job interviews, the question may be like, what is like the challenges, the most challenging issues during your work? But since this is more specific, right, in an academic setting, so it's about research. When you are really asked this kind of questions, try not to, just share any stories, but make sure that you address or approach these questions from a positive side. So although these are challenging, although the issues are hard, but try to make it or frame it as if it was a positive thing to happen. Still about research, another question is, what are your ideas for supporting your research financially? Do you have any plans to apply for any grants? If so, describe the projects for which you are hoping to receive funding. Another thing about academic job is to get a grant. What collaborations have you had in your research in the past? What is your style or manner of collaborating with others? So it's about teamwork. The next one, the question can also be about teaching. What are the examples of the questions? Here we are. Could you please describe your teaching experience? So, although you can just tell any kind of teaching stories, make sure that the story that you are telling is a unique one. So, you can stand out from the crowd. No. What is your teaching philosophy in general? Describe a course you would like to teach. Describe your approach to instruction and methods of evaluation. Which courses in our calendar would you be able to teach? So it's about our preference in teaching, right? How would you teach X course, for example, Psychology 101, Research Methodology course, and etc. Make sure your answers fits the needs of the university or department interviewing you. So before we attend the job interview, academic job interview, or simply any kind of job interview, we need to make sure that we really know what the department is currently seeking for. So we know how to tailor our answers to their needs. So they will find ourselves as an asset to their institution. Still about teaching. What would be your approach to teaching a graduate course in X in terms of methodology and content? In this kind of question, make sure your answer fits the needs of the university or department interviewing you. And then how do you see the relation between your teaching and your research interests? Are they in line or are they very different? Like that. What courses would you like to establish in our department at the undergraduate and graduate levels, if that's possible? How would you go about developing that area for students? So in this kind of questions, we are asked to be proactive, to be creative as well. Still about teaching. Our students are asking us to offer a course on X. What would be your approach to responding to that call? So it's like the interviewer is giving us a challenge to propose a new course. So what do you think will be the important considerations in providing that course? How would your students describe you? In your teaching experience, what have your greatest challenges been and how have you responded to these challenges? So the same with challenges in research, right? Next one, service. Have you done any committee work? Which of our committees will be of most interest to you? So it's like community service, right? So research, teaching, and community service. What do you think the role of a thesis or dissertation supervisor should be? So in here, it's more like we acting as a supervisor for our students in writing their thesis or dissertation. What kinds of experience have you had supervising or advising graduate and or undergraduate students on research projects? So it's asking about our experience, but if we haven't had any experience in this context, so just tell the truth. Still about service. Another example of question will be, what kind of administrative or organizational roles have you taken on in the past? What do you think your strengths are in this area? What kinds of professional development or service activities have you been involved in? So first we are asked about our research, our teaching, then our service. And they are not only asking about our, our preference, but also what we have done in the past. Or simply speaking, in those three areas, teaching, research, and service, we will be asked about our track record. So make sure that even though we are a fresh graduate, we have a good track record in academic activities. And other possible questions that may be asked in an academic job interview are, what attracts you to our institution? It's actually a very common question in a job interview, right? So we need to know and have a, advanced research on the institution we are applying to. Why would you like to work at our university or department? What assets will you bring to our program? What qualifies you for this position? What are your major accomplishments? What 2 or 3 accomplishments are you most proud of? So it's more like a very personal question, right, about us. Next one. What traits and or qualifications do you have that make you well suited to this position? It's still about question about ourselves, right? What would you like to tell us that's not on your CV? So we cannot include all information about ourselves in our CV. So when you're asked that kind of questions, make sure you just don't pick any information not listed in the CV, but something that may attract your interviewer to follow up your application. Right? Always make sure that you can stand out from the crowd. Are there any questions you would like to ask me or to ask us? And when you are offered that kind of chance, make sure that you already prepare a question beforehand. When you're asked or given that opportunity to give question and you do give questions, the interviewer will see you as someone that is really eager or very interested to join the institution. And that's very important. About your questions, always have a few questions ready from your background research of the institution, department, faculty, students, courses, ties with other departments, research focuses, and so on. So you can ask questions to your interviewer about those topics, but have it ready before the interview so you don't think it on the spot, just in case you cannot really construct a question on the spot. If your questions were answered during the interview, let the search committee know and be specific that the committee knows that you have done your homework. Another questions will be, where do you see this department university in 5 years? What's the teaching load like? What's the tenure process like? What is the institutional support for scholarly work? For example, study leave, financial support for conference travel, professional development fund, and teaching freebies. So these are the questions, the examples of the questions that you can ask to your interviewer, right? Okay, so I hope those questions, the list of questions, can give you clearer picture in what will happen in an academic job interview. Okay, I hope it will help you prepare yourself for your academic job interview and you can succeed that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that marks the end of our lecture 12 and also our course of academic English for academic communications. I'm so happy that you can follow lesson by lesson, lecture by lecture up to the lecture 12. If you want to read more about the the material of this course, you can go to this book, Academic Communication Skill by Huang in 2010. And if you want to read more about the material of this lecture 12, please go to those pages that I already wrote on slide 31. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrap for lecture 12 and also for this course. Thank you so much for joining my course. I appreciate that so much. Hopefully this will be beneficial for you in preparing yourself to be more skillful in English academic communication. And get ready for your final test to wrap up all the materials we have learned so far. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in another course.